I am Manning Marable. The voice of black political journalism has always
My name is
proved to
Mumia
be
Abu-Jamal.
decisive throughout black history. From David Walker's appeal in 1829 to the political journalism of Frederick Douglass to the Black Panther newspaper. And that's part of the reason why Mumia is so dangerous to the state. That critique of democracy, it doesn't ground itself to the view that reforming an unjust and inherently undemocratic system is the way to advance the interests of blacks or poor people or working class people or women. And that's the tradition from which he speaks.
Relatively tall, mountainous cheekbones, dimples like donuts, and skin the color of Indian corn, she left life in the South for what was then the promised land up north. Although she lived, loved, raised a family, and worked for over half her life up north, the soft lyrical accents of her southern tongue never really left her. Words of single syllable found a new one in her mouth, often rising on the second syllable. Keith became Keith, child became child, and her reedy, lengthy laughter lit up a room like a legal holiday. She and her children lived in the PJs, the projects, but it wasn't until years later, when we were grown, that we understood we lived in poverty, for our mother made sure our needs were met. She was a gentle woman who spoke well of most folk, if at all, but was like a lioness when one of her children were attacked. In the early 60s, when her daughter got caught up in a neighborhood fracas that boiled out of control, she snapped a broomstick in two, whipped open a path down the block to where her daughter stood, paralyzed by terror, grabbed her, and whipped her back home. Only when she was safely back indoors was it found that she had been slashed while outdoors. She never noticed, so powerful was her love for her daughter. Deep rivers of loving strength flowed through her. It is my belief that a mother's love is the foundation of every love that follows. It is the primary love relationship, the first that humans experience, and as such, a profound influence on all subsequent and secondary relationships in life. It is a love relationship that surpasses all reason. Perhaps that's why I thought she would live forever, that this woman who carried me, my brothers, and a sister would never know death. For over 30 years, she smoked cigarettes, Pall Mall called Pell-Mells, and Marlboros, but I still thought she would live forever. When she died of emphysema while I was imprisoned, it was like a lightning bolt to the soul. Never, during my entire existence, had there been a time when she was not there. Suddenly, on a cold day in February, her breath ended, and her sweet presence, her wise counsel was gone forever. To see one's mother die while imprisoned, to see her lifeless form while held in shackles from death row. This is Mumia Abu-Jamal. It has been over 3 decades since I last looked into his face, but I find him now sometimes hidden in the glimpse of a mirror. He was short of stature, shorter than I at 10 years, fully smoothly bald, with a face the color of walnuts. He walked with a slight limp and smoked cigars, usually Phillies. Although short, he wasn't slight, but was powerfully built, with a thickness, not a fatness, of form. His voice was deep, with the accents of the South wrapped around each word, sweet and sticky like molasses. His words often tickled his sons, and they tossed them among themselves like prizes found in the depths of Cracker Jack boxes. Words that were wondrous in their newness, their rarity, their difference from all others heard. "Boys, cut out that tussling, hear me?" And the boys would stop their wrestling, their bellies near bursting with swallowed, swollen laughter, the word vibrating, sotto voce, barely heard in their throats. Tussling, 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 tussling. For days, for weeks, these silly little boys had a new toy, and with this one word could reduce the others to teary-eyed fits of fall-on-the-floor laughter. Tussling! He was a relatively old man when he seeded these sons, And because of his age of over half a century, he was openly affectionate in a way not usual for a man of his time. He kissed them, dressed them, and taught them by example that he loved them. He talked with them and walked and walked and walked with them. "Dad, I want to ride," I whined. "It ain't good for you to ride so much, boy. Walking is good for you. Good exercise for you." Decades later, I would hear that echo in one of my sons, and my reply would echo my father's. His eyes were the eyes of age, so discolored by time they seemed bluish, but there was a perpetual twinkle of joy in them, of love and living. He lived just over a decade into this son's life, and his untimely death from illness left holes in the souls of his sons. Without a tether, I sought and found father figures like Black Panther Captain Reggie Shell and Black Panther Party Defense Minister Huey P. Newton, and indeed the Black Panther Party itself, which in this period of utter void taught me, fed me, and made me a part of a vast and militant family of revolutionaries. Many good men and women became my teachers, my mentors, and my examples of a revolutionary ideal. Zayd Malik Shakur, murdered by police when Assata was wounded and taken. Geronimo Gijaga, also known as Pratt, who commanded the LA chapter of the BPP with distinction and defended the party from deadly state attacks, himself a political prisoner, who because of the state's frame-up and judicial repression has been separated from his family and children for a quarter of a century. Here, in this restrictive place of fathers without their children and men who were fatherless, one senses and sees the social costs of that loss. Those unloved find it virtually impossible to love, and those who were fatherless find themselves alienated and at war with their own communities and families. My own sons were babies when I was cast into this hell. Neither letters, cards, nor phone calls could heal the wounds that they and their sisters suffered during the long, lonely years of separation. Here, in this man-made hell, I find young men bubbling with bitter hatreds and roiling resentments against absent fathers, several who have taken to the odd habit of calling this writer Papa. Certainly high irony when one notes this writer was himself an absent father and now absent grandfather. Perhaps conscious of this irony, I resisted the nickname until I could no longer. I realized that I lived amidst a generation of young men drunk, not only with alienation, but also with father hunger. I had the Black Panther Party. Who did they have? Well, here they have Delbert Africa, Geronimo Gijaga, Chucky Africa, Mike, Ed, and Phil Africa, Dr. Mutulu Shakur, Sundiata Akoli, and other old heads like myself. I realized that I resented being papa to young men I didn't know, while being denied the opportunity to be a present father to the children of my flesh and my heart by the state's banishment. I was also in denial, for who was the old head they were calling? Certainly not I. It took a trek to the shiny steel burnished mirror on the wall, where I found my father's face staring back at me to recognize the real. I am he, and they are me. From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
This is Martin Sheen. Mumia Abu